Hi, I am Emily Brokaw, and this is my fellowship journey. Let's take a quick peek into my classroom to see the kind of learning experiences I seek to give my students and how great my students are. I teach U.S. History and On-Ramps U.S. History. As you saw in that video, my students are kind, perseverant, and agentic, meaning they set goals for themselves, collaborate with their peers, and seek and implement feedback to move their learning forward. I wanted to be a fellow because I wanted to stretch myself as a teacher and learn how to foster my students' abilities to be lifelong learners. I'm continually trying to give my students opportunities to use their voice in their learning journeys and reflect on who they are, how they learn, what they know, and where they want to go. My goal for my first design cycle in the fall was to figure out how to incorporate the positives of the distance and hybrid learning experiences into my in-person class. I conducted empathy interviews that asked students to share about their experiences in distance learning and what type of learning environments engage them both in a virtual and an in-person format. I learned that my students appreciated the flexibility and self-pacing aspects that were found more in virtual learning, but also had a strong need to experience classes with a collaborative and engaging culture. To allow my students more flexibility and choice in our in-person class, I created learning plans that allowed my students opportunities to self-pace through lessons and to choose the type of learning activities that best fit their needs as learners. Students were given opportunities to choose to collaborate with their peers, and I love seeing students choose collaborative activities and learn with classmates that they hadn't yet interacted with. I want to continue to push myself to allow my students choice in how they learn and represent their learning and use the learning plan structure to strengthen my ability to work with small groups. Here are some of my students' reflections from a student survey I gave after my first design cycle. I like how my teacher is creative, and one activity I like is we are on our own pace, and one thing she does that helps me is by giving me feedback. I like the may-do because we get to choose what work we will complete. And I like the task tablet. It makes everything go in order, and I like to do the may-do because it gives me an option. My goal for my second design cycle was to identify ways to give my students greater voice about their learning and help them see greater relevance in their learning and experiences in school. During my empathy interviews, I discovered that students had very few opportunities to share about their learning and identify how their learning was relevant to them, especially in core classes. Based on this, I worked with the Assessment for Learning team to pilot student-led conferences, which allowed my students a public opportunity to share their learning and practice advocating for themselves, which is a skill they will need throughout their life. I even developed my current prototype of one-on-one conferences based on feedback my students gave me about my instruction during their student-led conference. Here are some clips from the student-led conferences.
And with Brokaw for attending my conference. The purpose of this conference is for me to share what I've learned this semester, the feedback I've received, and the plans that I have to improve my learning based on that feedback. My goal for second semester and for us to share about how we can all support my learning. This conference is focused on my learning in On-Ramps U.S. History. On-Ramps U.S. History is a dual enrollment class where I take U.S. History. Emily and I am enrolled in U.S. History at the University of Texas at Austin. I set out at the start of the year to be a compliant learner this year. I wanted to be the type of learner because I was never very interested in U.S. history, so I thought I would just do my work and get it over with. But when working with my team in On-Ramps, my learning style has changed to being more engaged. I believe I've become more engaged because I like to say what I'm thinking, ask questions, and participate with my writing and my ideas. I also like to engage my ideas with my peers so we can all collaborate on our work together. Hello,
What have you learned about yourself as a learner by being in on-ramps U.S. history?
I learned that I could use my peers around me to help me with things that I don't understand. I don't always have to figure it out by myself because most of my peers are very kind and they will help me with anything that I need.
Speaking with others kind of actually helps me a lot more than I thought it would. I thought at first it would like interrupt me or just kind of like keep me off track, but it's literally the opposite. It's like whatever we're speaking about in class has to be whatever assignment we're doing, and it just kind of like it gives off more information. So I think I've realized how I should kind of keep an open mind about the kind of like work we do, not just like in collaboration or just like in general. I think just have an open mind on everything or what the teacher has planned for us. I think that's what I would do.
Here are some reflections from the students who led their conference and their participants.
Speaking with others,
I loved how this experience allowed my students a deep reflection opportunity and gave them a voice about their learning journeys. Being an Innovation in Teaching Fellow was probably the best part of my school year. I enjoyed learning more about personalized learning and getting to collaborate with other teacher innovators. This experience allowed me to see how I can apply design thinking to my classroom practice and how it could make me more intentional and reflective about my classroom practice. I loved conducting empathy interviews to learn more about how my students see and experience school, and I hope to continue using empathy interviews as a way to build stronger relationships with students and give them a greater voice in school. I hope to continue using what I've learned about design thinking and empathy to be more intentional and reflective about the decisions I make as an educator, and always seek to give students a greater voice in their education.